Hey, what's up, Box of One World? It has been way too long. We've been off for some time doing some other things, but we are back again. Make sure you check out our last episode with Ray Doswell from the Negro League Baseball Museum. Really interesting episode. Covered a lot of things. It's definitely worth the watch. Today's episode, we're going to be talking some Blue Jays. Great start to the season yesterday. And also, I think we'll touch on some Raptors a little bit because it's probably been way too long since we've talked Raptors. I think probably maybe 3 or 4 episodes because we had a couple of baseball episodes and some time in between. So we'll just talk about what's happened because since our last Raptors episode, it's gone downhill. It hasn't looked great. So we'll touch on that. So before we even get into it, how have you guys been? Anything new? Anything interesting going on with you guys? Still locked in?
Yeah, let's get on to sports.
Yep, locked in. I'm assuming maybe the vaccine rollout might be up in a month, hopefully.
Yeah, and let's see what happens after that because even then, who knows? But hopefully better days ahead. Definitely a good day yesterday for the Blue Jays. So a 3-2 win over the Yankees in the Bronx in extra innings. The pen looked good. Ryu, not bad. Would you go just over 5 innings? And what do you guys take from this? I mean, it's one game, so obviously this is a marathon, not a sprint, so we can't take too much from it. But what did you guys think?
They have a very good bullpen and as Buck Martinez said 9 times during the broadcast yesterday, they have a lot of velocity coming out of that pen that they haven't had in recent years. So they have the ability. I mean, I don't want to get overly excited about like Merriweather after that one inning, where he just threw nasty filth. But I think the bullpen will be a strength of the team. Don't want to get excited, but the defense was better than what it's been in recent years. I mean, offensively, they scored 3 runs, one of them in extra innings with starting the inning with the man on second. So it's not a true 3 runs, but the offense was what it was. So good start. Usually younger teams struggle in close games because they'll blow a play or they may not have as deep a pen because when you're in sort of like a rebuilding mode, teams will not really invest a lot of money in a strong pen. You find yourself out of position, you don't defend the right way, and they played a very tight game yesterday. So one game, they're expected to hit. The rotation will be a question mark as we move into this year. I mean, if they are in the race in July, they have a deep enough system that they could always add to the rotation. But it's one game. Hasn't really changed my outlook yet. But yeah, we'll take it for what it was. A good start.
Yeah, I mean, sure, one game, but it's always fun to see them win rather than lose. And let's start with Merriweather because you mentioned him, and yeah, it's just one appearance. But man, I mean, we saw him a few times last year as well, and you see the stuff, and you can see why they liked him so much, right? And yes, it hasn't panned out the way they expected in that JD trade, but I mean, this guy, if he keeps it together and if he stays healthy, could be a really, really good arm at the back end of the bullpen. Like that was some real filth yesterday.
And I guess that's going to be the big thing.
It's right.
it's the staying healthy, right? None of this matters if he doesn't stay healthy, but he looked really good. I was super impressed with what I saw, and to do it in the Bronx in the opener had me really excited. I don't know what to expect because like you touched on, the rest of the rotation past Ryu, like what are we really going to see? Because that part has me nervous.
Yeah, I mean, Ross Stripling starting next game. I mean, he really ideally shouldn't have been in the rotation, but you have injuries. Initially he was taking Nate Pearson's spot, and right now, I mean, Robbie Ray's out. It's actually interesting that of the 4 main signings the Jays had in the offseason, 3 of them are on the shelf right now, right? Springer, hopefully he's back soon. And obviously, so early on, it's really not big of a deal. But I think it's important that you do have this good bullpen because besides Rio, like we said, there's not a whole lot behind him. So you'll need a lot of quality arms in the bullpen. You'll need a lot of depth, which has already been tested with Kirby Yates out. He was supposed to be the closer. He's already out for the season. So the depth's already starting to get tested. So you'll need a lot of quality arms. So it's good to see that they have them. But I think we'll probably need a lot more to get through the season, right?
Oh, from the rotations, in the rotation for sure. Word was this morning, Ross Atkins met with the media, and he did say George Springer is being targeted for the home opener in Eden next week.
Mm-hmm.
So hoping he can join in then. Join the roster then. Robbie Ray's getting close. Pearson's getting close. But even then, there's still question marks. It's not like you can say, all right, they're back. We're good to go.
Yeah, and I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, with the Springer thing, I just hope, with the an oblique injury, I just hope that's not one of those things that lingers, and those things do tend to linger, because it would just be a shame for in his first season with us that he keeps coming in and out of the lineup. But I think aside from the pitching, some of the stuff that I saw defensively, I don't know if you guys agree, but Bichette made a nice play. Going to his right in the hole there. He wasn't able to, make the throw. He made the throw, but he wasn't able to get the out. But even on that play, like you see what Vlad was able to do, trying to stretch and make that play and help out his fielders. What I saw from Vlad defensively, I think leaves me positive. I'm optimistic. That play by Bichette. I know it's like one game, but even Simeon, when going to his left in the hole, like he made a nice play to get an out at first there. So I like what I'm seeing, and I want to ask you guys: is Biggio undervalued by a lot of players, by a lot of fans, or do you think he's overvalued by a lot of fans? I like what I see from him. I like his versatility. I think he's going to be super important in the next year.
I think he'll be good in the role that they put him in, and that is a super utility role. And I think if you're in a super utility role, there'll be enough at-bats available for you. Like you'll probably be up at the plate 500 times in a year if you can play multiple positions. Yesterday, he looked pretty decent at third. Obviously, we'll need to see a lot more games to see what the range looked like. Got a nice out at at home. Made a few good throws overall. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard, right? I mean, if you look at the numbers, he struggles mightily against like real high velocity, but then I honestly don't know what the league average is for high velocity, right? So I don't know where he ranks, and I'm sure if we run the numbers, we'll probably know. And that's probably the biggest dent against him. And speaking of that, I mean, what do you guys think of the lineup construction yesterday as well? Do you think Biggio was where he should have been? What do you guys think of the rest as well?
No, I didn't like Semien leading off. That's
me neither.
Other than 2019, 19 when he was an MVP candidate, he's never been an on-base guy. So unless they believe he could be, he is that. He's still that. He's never really been that guy. So Semien's calling card in recent years has always been his defense. So I don't love him being up there. I think Biggio would be fine as a leadoff guy. I mean, he struggles against velocity, so there's going to be that challenge with facing a guy like Garrett Cole. So you have to be mindful as to who the starter is. But at least Biggio, one thing is that he's going to take a lot of pitches. He's going to draw walks. So if you get a guy that has a good on base, even if he has a low batting average, leading off, that's better. And then if this whole Vlad Jr. weight loss thing is really like helps him achieve his potential, I could see him moving up the lineup, and then Springer comes back, and that could be your top three. and you have Gurriel as well. I didn't love the top two. I didn't love the lineup construction at the top. Now, I think they combined went 0 for 10, 0 for 11, the top three hitters. I mean, one of them was Bull, but I don't like Semien leading off. That's where I'll
Yeah,
say.
me neither. And I think that's where Biggio's versatility comes in a little bit, right? I mean, what is he good at? He's got some pop. He walks a lot, and I mean, if you're looking at offensive value, that's where his offensive value is to the Blue Jays. So, given what they have right now and what we know of the players with Springer out, I would probably keep Biggio at the top, because the other benefit is, he wouldn't be coming up that often with a lot of men on base, right? So it's not as if he's a contact hitter. Early on, he can take some pitches. I think there's value in him, batting first. I would have liked to see Bichette 2, Hernandez 3, and maybe Gurriel, Guerrero 4, 5, and Semien slightly lower down the order. But again, just one game, so I don't know. But if I have to take things, anything from the game, I think it's the lineup construction. That was something that I found a little curious.
Did you guys see any of the post game interview with Charlie Montoyo to if he was asked about that, or
I actually
the reasoning behind it?
I'm not aware if he said
Charlie Montoyo at times has had interesting lineup construction for sure. I mean, there's talk that Springer will be the leadoff guy. I think he should bat second. I don't think he should be batting behind arguably your weakest hitter in the 9-hole once you turn that lineup over. I like Springer hitting second the way Josh Donaldson used to hit second, being their best hitter, best overall hitter, and getting so near the top where he'll get a lot of at-bats, but at least be hitting behind somebody who has a good on base. Mike Wilner actually had the idea of having Biggio lead off because of the on base. Like I said earlier, I like that when selectively against certain pitchers. I don't know if it's an ace, like a Cole, like a Garrett Cole type, or if you're going against a Shane Bieber, those kinds of power.
So who's your option right now, Bichette?
Bichette could be Bichette. I could go with.
You don't have a lot of high on base guys on this team, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of the lineup is still potential more than what they actually are. So I would base it on Biggio, maybe if it's a number 3 starter or worse, and if it's an ace or a number 2 or a guy that you have all the StatCast data. I mean, looking at last year's StatCast data, Biggio struggles against curveballs and sliders. Actually, the slider wasn't horrible, and hard 4-seamers. So maybe outline building your lineup using that data for your lineup construction. I know you don't want to be one day leading off, the next day hitting 7th, but being a little bit using that data effectively. And who knows, maybe that's what they did yesterday. Maybe Semien matches up well against Cole based on not plate appearances, but
based on the profile. So.
Yeah, profiles.
Yeah, it almost seems like it's got to be a leadoff by committee, and just play the matchup and see who slots in better there. And is that what they're going to do with the closer role as well? Is it just going to be or is it Romano's until he loses it?
I think it's to start the season.
It looks like it'll be Romano to start, but Merriweather had something to say about that yesterday.
I'd be okay with either of those guys. None of them have the kind of pedigree that you want, right? But they have the stuff to get it done. And I think that's the good part about this bullpen. You have a lot of guys who can get strikeouts. So even beyond Romano and Merriweather, I think you'll have guys who can, in a pinch, step up and be in that role. Especially those high leverage situations, right? If you're coming in to protect a 1-run game, or coming with men in scoring position.
Well, that's the new role that sort of be the fireman role is what they call it in the bullpen, where it started with Josh Hader in Milwaukee, although he's settled into the closer role. But in 2018, Hader out of the pen threw 81 innings, and he had 12 saves. So he was being used in a lot, and he finished 14 of those games only. So that's sort of become, and we saw this in the 80s a lot. There were a lot of relievers in the 80s. There used to be multi-inning relievers who could have 100 innings pitch. I don't know if we'll get to 100. But I could see one of Romano or Merriweather becoming that guy.
Yeah, and the thing with Merriweather is he's going to be used in a lot more different situations. I think there are times that if there's a bullpen day or if there's a fifth starter, he might be the opener as well for you. So I think that's why they want to stretch him out. So at least he can give you some of that. I don't know if he'll be a starter long term, but he can probably give you two.
And here's another question: because of Merriweather's injury history, is he better off just having that consistent one inning, kill it, knowing rather than having him maybe have to go multiple innings here, shut him down, maybe having just that consistent workload an inning at a time in a more predictable manner may keep him healthier. I don't know. I'm no trainer. I'm no pitching coach or doctor, but that's another thing to keep in mind with somebody like a guy who's 29 or 30 years old and in his rookie year because injuries have held him out all these years.
That's a fair point.
Since you mentioned the whole opener thing, and I don't think we've ever talked about this on the show, and I don't think even just between the three of us, I don't think we've ever talked your thoughts on baseball philosophy and where kind of baseball has gone. What do you guys think about that whole opener? Is that something that's sustainable throughout a season? Does that work in the playoffs? I know Tampa's had some success doing it, but is that something that you really like seeing, or do you prefer the more traditional approach where you let your starter go, you let him turn over the lineup more than 1.5, 2 times? You let them get deep into the game, or do you guys like this approach to baseball?
I'm conflicted. I mean, on one end, it's a pretty cool idea, right? I mean, if you have a starter who's not going to go deep in the game, and why don't you send someone out, protect him 3 times through the lineup, and use the opener? But I kind of like a balance. I don't want to see an opener every day, right? And I see the value, so that's why I don't want to negate it. But it's also a lot of fun watching someone like Garrett Cole pitch deep into a game, or any 1 and 2, right? Because there's something to be said about how the game is played and how the game should be enjoyed. But every now and then, if you have a situation, if it's a bullpen day, or if you have not so good 4s and 5s, maybe when Blue Jays have to call upon TJ Zeuch, for example, a whole lot, it would make sense to use the opener every now and then.
I like it when you have, I think it's very creative when your back of your rotation is not good. Ron, you'll appreciate this. I mean, imagine how much better Josh Towers could have been had we had used an opener for him. So where I think the problem has become is that frontline guys are not. Now, I think some of it, again, could just be preservation of the arms over a long period of time, especially given the kind of money that ace pitchers are getting paid. But I think that what's happened is that on the backside, I mean, we grew up watching Roy Halladay, where the expectation was you got to go. Your goal is to finish the game. If you come out early, so be it. If circumstances pull you out early for whatever reason, so be it. But your mindset is going in to finish. Now I think that the mindset has gone in to just get through the lineup 2.5 times. And we aren't seeing a lot of frontline guys go 200 innings anymore. In 2019, the last full season, only 15 pitchers threw 200 innings. That is really, really low, because if you have 30 teams and only 15 guys threw 200 innings, and 2 of them were on Texas, and Cleveland had Bieber and Bauer, although they traded Bauer midseason. Greinke was traded midseason. Houston had 2, Cole and Verlander, and 2.5, Greinke being the third. So 5 of them were on one team or spent time on one team, which means that the vast majority of teams did not have a starter go 200 innings. And that's crazy to me. It's not just a matter of teams figuring out using analytics effectively and minimizing looks or 3 times through the lineup you're gone. It's our pitchers being developed to go through the lineup 3 times plus.
So I think there's a whole combination of factors. So one thing I'm always wary of, and when they say there's one reason for anything, right? Like nothing in life, it's always a combination of a lot of things. So 3rd time through the lineup was something that gets talked about a lot, and for good reason. We see the numbers deteriorate a little bit. I think a lot of it, like Pramit said, okay, players are on really large contracts, team want to preserve the arms, but it also has to do probably with the fact that pitchers are throwing a lot harder than they used to. So if you go back and look at the years when Roy Halladay threw those 200 odd innings or close to 250 innings, the average fastball, a 4-seamer, probably would have been like 4 miles slower than what it is today. And I think that has an impact. Like there's some really, really high stress now, and we know it's having an impact on offense. So that's the other part of the conversation. But that's why you can see probably pitches don't have. It's a lot more risk to have them go through 200 innings in a season, right?
And I think that also comes
99, like 70, like over 60, 70 pitches a game.
And I think that comes back to even my previous point is that, well, they're not developing enough of the secondary stuff or learning how to throw with less velocity, but having that secondary stuff. I mean, a guy like Ryu doesn't throw hard. He's been a very effective pitcher. I still think it's possible to have Stroman he has some good velocity, but he doesn't strike out guys. And I still believe that with guys throwing harder and with the analytics being what they are, just wanting to get velo and getting strikeouts, like we gushed about Merriweather yesterday, but that's almost like, and I guess with a bullpen, it's different than with the starter, but that's sort of emblematic of the problem. It is velo. It is 95 plus has become more the norm, but more guys blow themselves out. I think another factor is pitchers getting called up younger because they're cheaper, and teams saying, well, what we'll do is just, even if they haven't fully developed their secondary stuff in the minors, we will bring them up because there's more value in paying a guy a league minimum and just having him go 6 than holding him down a couple of years, potentially missing out on his prime velocity years, and then and winning now.
So I think the fascination with velo has always been there. I don't think there was ever a time in baseball where people did not have fascination with velocity. The difference is that now circumstances are different. Like players become specialists a lot early on, even much earlier than the major league careers. They have access to good nutrition. They have good access to coaching. Like you have things like Driveline now, and like there's a whole lot going on which allows players to throw hard a lot easier. But I think this fascination with velo is always there, and it's interesting. It reminds me of, I don't know which book he wrote it in, but Dirk Ahus. He was generally a high 80s guy in his career, and he knew, I think he was in high school at one time, and he knew there was a scout coming to watch him, and he even had a splintered finger or something, because I think he used to throw a curve or a change. I don't remember honestly, but I think it was a curveball. But he decided to throw that curveball a little bit differently just because because of the finger. And the scout thought it was a slider, and when he saw the finger later on, he says, "Oh, don't worry." But what the other interesting piece he said was, because the scout was there, he reached out and threw real hard a couple of times, even though they were nowhere close to the plate. One of them actually went on top, like over the backstop, and it just went by, but it hit like 94, 95 on the radar gun. And his scouting report said ability to throw hard with a budding slider, right? So, I mean, this was probably 15, 16 years ago. fascination was always there. It's just now it's a lot easier.
Well, I think and I think that with that combined with StatCast data, and I think with analytics really highlighting the value of being able to miss bats, it's led to sort of this. It's we'll bring a guy. We don't need as much secondary stuff anymore. Just go hard. We'll take you out after 5 or 6. Get the Ks. Keep guys from even making contact. Before it used to be, it's almost gone from getting guys out to getting guys not to make contact. I think so. There's a lot of factors. I think you brought up a really good point: is that guys are just throwing harder in general because of improved nutrition and training techniques, and just becoming like, as we go through generations of athletes, everybody becomes bigger, stronger, faster. So, but are they smarter necessarily? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking. Sorry, just one point. I mean, you see all the hockey players now, and you go back and watch games from early '90s. It's like those guys can't skate, man. Like compared to the guys with it, like, it's like it's the same thing.
Yeah, and Azam, that was from Bullpen Gospels. I remember reading that and loving that book. So for our viewers and listeners, if you haven't read that book by Dirk Hayhurst, great book, really recommend it. Easy read too. But coming in from as a mostly basketball, soccer, other sports than baseball kind of guy, and I was a baseball fan before, so coming back into the sport over the past couple of years and seeing the difference, to me it was really staggering. And it's almost like somebody who watched basketball in the 90s and didn't watch for a good part of the 2000s, then coming back into the NBA now and seeing how the game has changed and how it's such a 3-point dominated game. I guess I would kind of equate this change to that, where it's there's stats to back up playing a different way, and there isn't necessarily one way to do things. I just I like the fact that it's not everybody that's doing it. I like innovation, so I know that there are people that absolutely hate the idea of an opener and the way the Rays have kind of done it. But innovation is always good in a sport. Anything that changes the way, there can never just be one way to play any sport. You've seen innovation in soccer, you've seen innovation in basketball, innovation in football, in everything. So I love innovation. I don't want it to be one of those things where everybody's doing it because everybody thinks, and I don't think that's the case, because you're still going to have those teams who have the starters who can go deep. The one thing that I kind of miss, and maybe it's just because I haven't been watching as much baseball, but it was always that when Roy Halladay would get himself into a jam and he's got men on second and third, and he's got no outs, and he's allowed to work his way out of it. I mean, obviously different case because it's Roy Halladay and you have a lot more faith in the guy to work his way out. But there's something about baseball when there's that romanticism about working yourself out of a jam and getting out of those types of situations, which I feel that we don't get to see that as much anymore.
Yeah, wasn't it really cool yesterday when Romano got out of it?
Loved it. Yeah, exactly.
Well, even David Phelps, right? Judge came on, he got a double play.
Mm-hmm.
The game was thrilling to watch because of that, right? And it goes back to, okay, and while innovation is important, I think it's also important that the rules and how the game looks has to change along with that as well, right? If you keep, because people find better ways to do things. There's no question about that in every sport that has happened. But one thing baseball lags, or behind a lot of other sports, is they don't adapt. The rules don't change as much. And that sometimes makes it a boring game. So while I'm in favor of all of that, I'm also in favor of either lowering the mound or even taking back the mound a few feet, just to balance the battle between bat and ball, right? Because, I mean, in all honesty, you go to a game for 3 hours. I mean, you're not going these days, but it's a 3-hour long game, but the whole thing only lasts, the action's only not more than 15, 20 minutes, right? And
I think baseball, now they're starting to do it this year, but because of just such a vast minor league system, even with the cuts to franchises, they have the ability to experiment more than any other league does with rule changes. And they're doing that this year whereby they're making the base sizes a little bit longer, a little bit bigger, rather, from 15 inches to square inches to 18. Defensive positioning rules at AA. The low A in the Southwest League is trying the electronic strike zone. So baseball, in theory, in some ways, they were very innovative because they're sort of the ones that were the brought in non-baseball people to run their teams, like analytics and the eye. But now it's just gone too far, and now they all think the same. So I think that we need to sort of find that. We've gone from one extreme to the other. Now we need to find that balance. And I found Theo Epstein, what he, with his new role with the league, is to address some of these things. And he even said that, a lot of this is me, because it's people of my generation that came in and took over the game and became more analytically driven and looked for these sort of quote unquote advantages to exploit. But it went gone too far.
Sorry, finish your thought. I just wanted to.
No, that's it.
No, that's a fair point. And innovation from that standpoint, baseball has been light years ahead of other sports. There's no question about that. But here's the thing. If it hadn't happened 25, 30 years ago, it would have started happening today. Because this kind of stuff happens, right? This analytics was on the base of Sandy Alderson era in Oakland, when we read in Moneyball that, they valued walks, and they told manager either the players walk or you walk, right? In minor leagues, and players started walking. Before that, who's the Dodgers GM?
Friedman.
Sorry? No. The famous Brooklyn Dodgers GM.
Branch Rickey.
Branch Rickey. He was the first guy who hired this Canadian guy, sort of technically you can say the first sabermetrician, to keep a log of all the splits, right? He was the one who came up with the idea of a farm league and like all these farm teams. So you'll always have that. So if that hadn't happened 25, 30 years ago, it would have started happening today, because some other sport would have taken the lead. My point has always been not just the innovation from like exploiting the rules, but how do the rules, the powers that be that set the rules, they react to make sure that there is a fair balance between bat and ball, right? Like, for example, shifts need to be looked at. Like, just to give you an example, in cricket, you can't put all 9 people on one side. There is a rule, because you're trying to protect, because people pay to come and watch the action. Like, at the end of the day, sport has to survive, right? We know a lot of young generation probably doesn't watch our sports as much as the previous generations. That there are a lot of other opportunities for people. So you've got to keep the game exciting, right? So I'm all for all these innovations from an analytics standpoint. How do the rules react to it is also very important. And no matter what you say about football, one good thing about football is they do tinker with rules a lot.
Yeah.
Basketball did too. I mean, getting rid of hands.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely. Yeah. So one thing I wanted to ask you, since you brought up cricket, has there been an analytics shift in cricket?
Yes, big time. Again, I don't think anyone's as close to baseball. The analytics shift in cricket has happened more behind the scenes. You won't see a lot of fan websites, or if there are, they're more rudimentary and they're more they're not very popular. So from a fan perspective, it hasn't happened as much. But on the back end, yes, they've tinkered a lot. They've put like chips and bats to see the angles and all that stuff. Obviously, biomedical. There's a whole stuff happening there as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Why do you think, not to completely like take this off track and talk about cricket too much, but it's interesting. So why do you think there hasn't been the wide reception from fans in cricket analytics as there has been? Is it just because it hasn't been around? Like it's not something that's been around long enough, or is it just the type of fan that just isn't interested in that part of the game?
No, I think fans would be interested. There's a lot of good work happening, especially if you look at analysts in India. They've done some really interesting work. But most of the work that has happened on a very advanced scale, which kind of just blows past the fan,
Yeah.
base, right? So they haven't been able to develop a lot of metrics that the fans can go. So, for example, 20 years ago, if we would talk about OPS, now we can talk about weighted runs created plus, for example, or WAR. Those kind of stats are not available to fans, right? And some of the new ones that are available to fans are still prone to interpretation. Like there's a new metric called control metric. What they want to see is if you've played 80 deliveries, how many times were you in control, right? Now, behind the scenes, teams have a lot of access, right? So, for example, if a bowler has a good spell of 7 overs and he's taken 2 wickets, they can see, okay, based on the number of times he beat the bat, he should have taken 4 wickets maybe, but he did 2. So they kind of have an idea, okay, it's working well. England, their national team is very, very heavy on analytics. And for example, they'll see, they just don't look at averages like in baseball, like we don't, right? For shorter formats, what they do is what's the acceleration level, right? How many deliveries of balls a pitch, like a batter takes to accelerate? Because more often than not, just like in baseball, you fail as well. So if you're taking that many deliveries to accelerate, what if you get out after taking that many deliveries, right? So the people who accelerate fast. So there's a whole lot of other stuff happening, but it's actually jumped from point A to D instantly, and B and C, which should have been there for fans, probably hasn't developed as much.
Yeah, I always find it interesting to see how different sports get in, like start to use analytics. Like, we see it we've talked about this before with the soccer broadcasts in Germany, where they start to work in some of the positioning of players. So it's always just interesting, and cricket bears some similarity to baseball. So I was always just wondering, like, is that something that's happened? It's cool to hear. If anybody somehow stumbles across this video or our podcast and is big on cricket analytics, please reach out to us. We'd love to have you on and just pick your brain, because that's cool stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not to say that there's nothing for the fans. There's a lot of new interesting stuff that's come out, especially if you're watching broadcasts. You'll see win probability and a whole lot of other stuff. The one thing cricket has always been more advanced than baseball is the TrackMan technology, or the Hawkeye technology that tennis also uses. Cricket was the first sport to use that to determine a mode of dismissals called LBW. And because that's a little bit more predictive, and umpires have always had to make that judgment call, and they've used it. They started using television technologies, I think, as way back in 1992. They've been using for runouts, which is like ground outs in baseball, right? So on that end, they've been slightly ahead of the curve. But I mean, the fan sites are there, but not as many as you'd see in baseball.
We need something.
Going back to baseball, we're talking about innovation. I find that in recent years, teams are now, the analytics are just being used to make every team the same. If it seems like, okay, strikeouts, exit velocity, launch angle, we don't care about strikeouts or any of that anymore. Like we don't care I look back to when I read a book on the Pirates when they broke their playoff drought, or even
Big Data Baseball.
Yeah, Big Data Baseball, and then the Royals, how they won in 2015, and had almost won in 14. There was teams use analytics more specific to like their ballparks, for example. Pittsburgh realized that in their ballpark, it was harder to play left field than center field, so they put their best defensive outfielder in left, which goes against convention. The Royals, who was that? Will Myers. Remember when they traded Will Myers and they got roasted? Like, how could you trade him? Well, the Royals realized we have the biggest outfield the biggest outfield space in baseball, more than any other team. Our ballpark has the biggest outfield. He cannot defend, and we have Hosmer at first. We don't have anywhere to put him, so we're going to trade him now and then build a team that has elite outfield defense, and we're going to have a pitching staff that puts balls in play where we can leverage that outfield defense, like pop-ups and things. And that was very smart team building. Whereas the Royals built their team in a way to suit their ballpark or suit their needs. Now we don't see that. It's always the same. It's velo, 3 times through the order. I mean, like a Garrett, I don't know what the history in the if there's obviously coming out of last year with the workloads, teams may be hesitant to have their starters go deep. But there was a time when Garrett Cole would not have ever left that game.
Yeah.
3 times, they didn't want him to face certain guys again. Like no matter what. And I feel that now the analytics has gone into a cookie cutter team building. Whereas even 5-6 years ago, we saw it was much more the strategies were unique to the team situation. You used analytics to get the best out of your team and the best out of your players. Now you're using analytics just to get players to do one thing: swing one way, hit this many home runs, get this many strikeouts. So it's gone too far.
And that's got to be frustrating as a player because it almost takes away from those moments. Who was it from the Jays last year? They got pulled after his second time through the order and went off on Montoyo. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, like that was a good decision with him, though.
Definitely. But just in general,
Blake Snell in the World Series.
Yeah, right. That was a bit of a head scratcher, in all honesty, and not because hindsight is 2020. A lot of people were already questioning because he was throwing pretty well, but I mean, we knew one way or the other, Tampa was going to stick to its script, right? But then, do you need to stick to the script all the time? Like, don't you want to see what's going on in the middle of the game?
Common sense too, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's almost like it's gone too much in one direction. There's got to be a little bit of both, and I think that's got to be the hardest part about being a manager is that sometimes you just got to play it by feel. I know the computer is telling you one thing, but sometimes like the eye test, you look at a guy and he's just Snell was working, so you just got to let it go. And that's got to be the frustrating thing as a player. It's you can't create that moment where this guy was in a rough situation and he worked himself out of it, and it's that one thing that you remember about that World Series for the next like 20 years. You know what I mean? You almost don't get that anymore.
Yeah, and you know what I mean? I went on the other podcast once, and they're like, okay, if you're interested in stats, explain the Blake Snell decision. And I mean, you can see the logic behind it, but I'm like, even myself, I was a little. Well, I would like to see Snell go a little bit deeper, right?
I think somebody like Keith Law, who was at the forefront of analytics, wrote a book on what's on analytics and said that was not a good decision. So, because it's not just about and I know there's a predictive element to it as well, but you have to also look at the other team. Like you talk about going from third time through the order, they're going to make adjustments, but were they able to make any kind of adjustment first to second time? That's the question.
Yeah.
Did they manage? How does that team adapt? Watch. I just felt like they had their plan and they were going to stick to it. And in some ways, you can respect it because they know what they want to do. But at the same time, you have to sort of have that in the moment intuitive thinking is gone. And it's not to say a manager you don't want to get back to where the manager's like, well, I just went with my gut. It's not that. It's watching what's unfolding and saying, you know what? I'm not going to go the way we thought. I think we should go this way because like maybe a guy just isn't hitters on the other team for whatever reason. Like it's a low pitch count. The hitters are not able to make the adjustments whatsoever. It's going well. The pitcher's healthy. Let's just continue on.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, right? Like, and we've come across this situation at work as well. Data is a tool to help you make better decisions.
Right.
If metrics start telling us what to do on a day in, day out basis, there's a bit of a conflict there, right? Because the whole purpose of analytics, the strength of analytics is that it's more information. It's better information for you, but you need to be able to contextualize it. I mean,
Yep.
you can even at work, we get so many different kinds of metrics. We need to understand what metrics means what at a certain point, right? And at what point you feel that, okay, we've gotten so granular about this piece that the sample size has become so small that it really doesn't tell us anything. So sometimes it's important to really drill down, and sometimes you need to pull back and have a bird's eye view, right? And use other pieces of information. Yes, there's some biases, obviously, but it's not as if, again, I'm not picking on him, but it's not as if Tanner Roark or TJ Zoid were pitching in the World Series, right?
Yeah.
I would have had an issue if they would have gone second time through the lineup, maybe. But Blake Snell pitching really well. There were no signs that he was doing anything. And yes, batters may make adjustments, but a pitcher of that caliber, you would expect him to make adjustments as well, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and like you said, like analytics should be a tool because how many innings can you actually remember, and how many like situations can you remember as a person? Like it's not humanly possible. So you use it as a tool, but at the end of the day, if that's what you're basing your entire decision off of, then what's the point of having a manager at that point? Because you can just have like a computer sitting in the dugout.
That's another reason why, even though baseball revenues have gone up, manager pay has gone down, because you're taking the responsibility out of it. They just deploy a game plan that they get. And while they should be open to using data, you shouldn't just be having a manager in there to fill a role because there's a requirement to have a manager. Why not get robot managers as well as robot umps?
I love this. I remember there being a video game for Super Nintendo. I think it was all robots playing. That's where we're headed, man. Just robot baseball league.
I think baseball finally identified.
Batters are starting to look like robots. Like batters are starting to look like robots because it's only the 3-dimensional. They're not 3-dimensional players. There's like 3 true outcomes, right?
Yeah.
They hit for a home run, or they strike out, or they walk. I mean, there's not a whole lot going on in between. Like Pramin and I still, I mean, there's a lot of nostalgia, but we still remember the 2011 opening day, right? The home opener we went to. And the double steal in the first innings, and Bautista showing that bunt and that swat. Like, it was a lot of fun watching.
Mm-hmm.
So those kind of instances, right? When you have men on base, and like, I mean, if you were truly looking at that, you wouldn't have probably one of the greatest innings in Blue Jays history, and that was the bottom of the 7th in the Game 5 of the ALDS, right?
Yeah.
It was so much fun because just put the bat on ball and let Rangers make all those errors. I mean, that was one of the greatest moments of my life.
So analytics tells you the what, but it doesn't tell you the why. It's pitchers, rather than pitchers shouldn't, maybe like a frontline guy could go more than 3 times, but typically 3 times max. But if it's a really bad pitcher, 2 times max. But rather than, it's now become, what about the pitchers who are able to sustain high performance as they get through 3rd time? What are they doing the 3rd time, potentially even 4th time through? What stuff do they have? How can we develop that? Instead, it's, you're right. Let's just not ever go down that path. Everybody 3 times max or 2.5 times max, and leave it at that, rather than thinking, you're right, there's something going, there's an opportunity for development. Instead, it's an opportunity just to fall in line with everybody else.
Yeah. So I asked a question, and it ended up being actually really good discussion that I don't think we've actually had a chance to have this type of discussion on the show yet. So it was actually really good. But I want to finish it off with just one thought and one image in your head about yesterday's Blue Jay game. Was there anything that looked more uncomfortable than Danny Jansen trying to bunt yesterday?
It was even more uncomfortable than listening to Dan Shulman and Buck Martinez on the radio. But honestly, it wasn't as bad. I listened to the last 3 innings on radio. It wasn't that bad. But sorry.
So on that, that's a good thing that you bring up. Like, I can't believe that they actually axed the radio broadcast, the specific radio broadcast, because I had good memories from when I was a kid when I wasn't able to watch a game and I can turn on the radio and listening to Tom Cheek on the radio, and it's completely different. So to simulcast a game, I hate that decision by Rogers.
And in all honesty, for me, radio was very important during pandemic because I don't want to choose between my marriage and baseball. So, I mean, I could still go out for a drive and listen to a game.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest, yesterday I listened to the last 3 innings, and maybe it was just once, or maybe because you're still used to hearing Dan Shulman, and he said he's going to try and have a bit of a balance. It didn't sound that bad, to be very honest. Buck Martinez, when he was doing color, it didn't really jive very well with radio.
Yeah.
Maybe that gets better with time.
It doesn't jive very well with TV at times, but we'll leave
that's
that.
a different story altogether. But so I don't know how it's going to sound like if Dan Shulman's not on, because he's done those at ESPN, right? So he's still used to it. So yesterday, at least, it wasn't that bad. Like I could figure out what was going on. I knew where the runners were, or what the count was, what was going on. So it wasn't that bad. But again, I'd be curious how it will sound if Shulman's not available.
I will be I really, really, really hope this is a 1-year deal for Rogers.
It's gotta be.
Have to just as a cost cutting measure because of COVID, although I think they're doing well financially. But anyways, that's the point. You would think a company like Rogers that sells internet and technology and would actually be doing better at a time like this when we're all at home. But regardless of that, I really hope it's a one-time thing, and I will also be I'm not going to criticize them if it doesn't work well on radio because it's just not a good setup for Buck and Dan. That said, Buck...
I mean, okay, Buck deserves
Jay
his own.
Bruce is hitting yesterday, and he's like, well, it sounds as if Jay Bruce has been around forever, but he's only 33. That's old for a baseball. What?
It's just Buck, man. That's Buck being Buck.
He made another comment about how who was it that attempted to steal? And Grichuk attempted to steal a base.
Oh yeah.
Out. And he's saying on the air, well, I think Charlie Montoyo and the Jays will be more aggressive on the base paths because they have a deeper lineup. So if a guy gets thrown out, it's not a big deal because the next guy will just hit a double and they'll get a guy back on base. I'm thinking, Buck, when you have a good offensive team, you tend to run less because you don't need to run, and it's not worth the risk of losing a base runner when you have a very deep lineup.
So that brings up one question I have for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Now that you have this rule that if with a tie game, you start with the runner on second in extra innings.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it makes more sense now that we know that Jays have brought in the best team not up north, they've kept them down south, but they haven't worried about maintaining flexibility or trying to get an extra year out of guys. They've brought what they felt was the best team available. Do you really think it makes sense to cut cords with Grichuk and keep Jonathan Davis, knowing the value of having a speedy runner for those extra games? Because teams go through like 15, 20 extra inning games in a season. I don't know, I haven't seen the numbers, but they're not few and far between. I mean, quite a few.
In theory, yes. I mean, practically speaking, there's going to be injuries. You may need to have games where I do suspect that we're going to have games where somebody like a Springer has to DH if he does continue to deal with an injury. So practically speaking, like if you're just trying to win one game in the moment, and then yeah, but if like let's say you're in a wild card game and Grichuk just doesn't match up well against the starter or that team, then you could say, you know what, Grichuk won't be in. We're just going to go with speed or something like. But long term, I mean, I just think that and I'm not a big Grichuk fan, but I think from a depth perspective, there's still a need for him.
That's a fair point.
And also Teoscar, and also because I actually believe that Rowdy is going to be the one that gets sent down. I don't see the fit for him. If Vlad is your first base DH type guy, Teoscar, you'd probably want him DHing a lot. I don't see the value in carrying a utility first baseman.
That hurts me. I love Rowdy. I want to see him in there. I love seeing him play.
I want to see as many DH at bats for Alejandro Kirk.
Oh man,
Yeah, that's hard because then you need a third catcher if you're gonna pull that.
it'll be interesting to see how Kirk handles the staff, how he's improved defensively. Like I think the word is, I didn't notice that he lost weight, but apparently he lost some weight and he's moving better behind the plate. I just want to see how he handles it defensively because I think that's going to be a big thing if he's your second catcher.
Yeah. Or I mean, if they want to keep Rowdy around, they could just go with the one less. They could go with the one less pitcher.
Well, that's the one thing. I mean, that's the benefit of having Kirk is because he's not a dead weight on the team as a backup catcher. You can give him some active at bats, which gives you the flexibility to either have an extra arm in the bullpen or you can carry around Jonathan Davis. I think because I think especially at home in extra innings, he's probably one of your key guys because if you put him on second, there's a good chance you can score.
I like the idea of a deep bench. Personally, I think, you have a 26-man roster now, 14 pitchers currently.
Mm-hmm.
I like a balance. I like having guys on the bench that could do specific things. Jonathan Davis will never be an everyday player, but I think he can be a very valuable fourth, fifth outfielder, defensive replacement, pinch runner. And that's a very valuable tool to have. It might be harder for them to do earlier in the year while they have a lighter rotation, like not a great rotation. But let's say, hey, they make an acquisition at the deadline for a starter. Now you could say, well, we're going to get a couple extra innings out of our starters. We can carry a better bench. But yeah, a lot of decisions to be made there. I'm not as big on Rowdy as a lot of other people are, to be honest. Even Kirk, great story, but we can't just say he's the man now moving forward. We need to wait.
He is the man. What are you talking about?
I'm just going to be honest here. The reason I like both of them is because of the body type. It gives me hope that I can excel at an elite level as an athlete. So that's why I like both of them. but not to continue. So the last thing I just want to cover because we've gone a little bit long. We haven't talked the Raptors in a long time. So I want to just a couple minutes on the Raptors just to get thoughts on the Gary Trent Jr. trade. What you think about the season, which has just been a dumpster fire since before the All-Star break. Private thoughts on Norm being shipped off and Matt Thomas and Terence Davis and what we got back for them, or you happy?
Yeah, so interesting. Matt Thomas, no issue. I think that it was worth the Flyers signing him, making less than $1 million a year. Elite shooter. If you could develop his game, it didn't pan out. I don't think he has the body, the athleticism, and I know, like Nurse and Masai, they don't want to have a bad defender anywhere.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes, I think, from the perspective of in the playoffs, teams target bad defenders like clockwork. So unless that guy is an elite scorer or an elite player on offense, you don't want to carry that. So I can understand that. Terence Davis, I'm a little bit surprised. I shouldn't be given what happened, given the ongoing.
Yep.
Given the ongoing legal situation.
Issues, yep.
Again, not up to us to say if he's innocent, guilty, or whatever, but something just never felt right. He wasn't playing much in the bubble, and when they went, which is interesting, Terence Davis and Rondé, who were getting a lot of minutes before the suspension, didn't get a lot of bubble minutes. So, and now Rondé is out of the league.
Yeah.
So, I wonder what's going on there. It makes me wonder, like, what's going on there, because Rondé was a very good player for them before he was a very good role player.
Yep.
Get his like garbage baskets, defend hard. He could be a small center if they needed to go small. Very good. So he was very valuable for them. So that's very surprising. So to get their second rounders, I mean, the team has shown that they are good at finding great players late. So if you use them to pick, great. If you package them together to make another deal in the offseason, great. Always good to have those assets. And also, I think that they were prepping for a potential Lowry deal where it could have been a 3-1 and they needed
like
a roster spot. So that's another factor. But it does give them some extra flexibility. Norm, I think I was telling you guys, part of me was thinking, well, isn't he the kind of guy you want to sign and then have those core 4 guys and get some other assets if you move Lowry and just wait for the next big star to become available in trade? Then you have those good players, may not be elite players, but very good players, and can match the salary, throw in some young players or picks, get the deal done. But then the more I thought about it was, if Norm gets 20, then you got 80 million locked up in 4 guys who are very, very good players, but Are those the 4 you want 80 million locked up in and then constricting your ability to do anything else? No. So it makes sense to deal him given what he was going to be paid, and the team. It's clear that he's not as good a defender as the other 3. And again, the team's philosophy is that if you don't defend, you don't play. So that said, nobody's really defending this year. But regardless of that, in terms of I think COVID really screwed them up as like fitness levels. I mean, you heard about Pascal losing all that weight during the lockdown. So while he was in quarantine, he says he lost about 15 pounds. And that's not like 15 pounds of Vlad Guerrero weight. That's like 15 pounds of strength that he lost. An interesting stat, I think I sent this to you guys on the WhatsApp group yesterday. In terms of speed per game, Pascal pre-COVID, 4.22 miles per hour. Post-COVID, 4.04. Fred, 4.25. Post-COVID, 4.19. OG, 4.14. Post-COVID, 4.04. So, and that matters. Like, that's just that extra second when you're rotating out to cover a guy on defense. Just that extra, a great shooter, all they need is that extra 1.5 second to get that shot off. So I think that, I don't know if from a fitness standpoint with the COVID and the lack of practices, it's just been a shit show. So to tie this all together, get the pick in the offseason. You're not in bad shape. The Lowry situation will sort itself out, and you have flexibility. Take advantage of it. Take advantage of, like, if you're going to miss the playoffs in a year that you're not in your own city and you're not going to have your crowd there anyway.
Yeah, and the downside, I know I heard Eric Corrine and Blake Murphy on their podcast, the Raptors Reasonableists. They were talking about how, like, it makes sense in one way, but at the same time, like, as Raptors fans, all we have right now, like, for a lot of people, is watching sports on TV, and it kind of just, it sucks that you're seeing them, like, it just looks like a completely different team. I don't hate the trades. My reaction to the Norm deal when it happened was, is Gary Trent Jr. really the best we can get? I can see why that trade makes sense. I don't mind the Rodney Hood piece in there either, because, as a bench piece, he can play a little bit of defense as long as he stays healthy. It's just, I've seen a lot of Gary Trent. Sure, he can hit some shots, but we're already a very 3-point centric team. And having him instead of Norm makes us even more 3-point centric. So I'm not crazy about it, but this season's done, man. Like,
yeah,
just go out in a blaze of glory. Forget this season. Forget this ever happened. Forget we were ever in Tampa. Azam, you okay with tanking the rest of the way?
Yeah, might as well. You're not winning a playoff.
Yeah. And you know what? Trent is people forget he's young. He's 22.
Yeah, that's the big thing. Yeah, exactly.
He can defend. He's a and he's young enough that he can develop. So I know people are saying, well, why didn't they get a young big? Well, first of all, young bigs are harder to come by. So if you have a really good young big, you're not trading him. As you can see on our team, that's a valuable commodity still. As much as people say, whoa, it's a smaller game now, you still need that at those bigs. Number two is
it's not just a young big. It's an athletic big, and the athleticism is the hard part to come by, right? Like people were saying, they should have made a move for John Collins. They should have made a move for Richaun Holmes. Like the deal has to make sense both ways, and you can't just say go out and get this guy because if the other, like we saw with the Lowry deal, if the other team doesn't want to budge, if Daryl Morey doesn't want to give you what you're trying to get, it doesn't matter what you think we can get. It just and that's what it came down to, and that's why I was ultimately okay with the Norm deal. I think it's just. I hope that teams would value Norm a little bit more, and they didn't. And if what you get back is Gary Trent Jr. and Rodney Hood, then so be it. At least we got something for him. And the good thing is that with the great Gary Trent Jr. deal, like he's an RFA, his cap hold is far less than what Norm's will be. So like it works out money wise. But my big concern is going to be next year. Get that draft pick. That's the first thing because I think. Being in that top 5, hopefully, will be huge for the Raptors. And the second thing is you got to get somebody who's a creator because, for the past 3 years, we still haven't had anybody who's a shot creator. Get somebody who can create their own offense, get to the rim. And, that solves a big issue that you have right now with this team, which is super 3-point centric. And, it works to a certain extent, but, when it dries up, and you're not going to be able to get a win as they saw against the Boston Celtics.
I mean, Gary Trent wasn't brought in for this year. They are thinking long term. So their thinking is that, obviously our flaws are our flaws. It's obvious, but we're not going to turn down talent because he doesn't quite meet the needs. You have to be more. You think that when you're a legit contender, then you got to think more positionally. But they're at a point now where just get your talent. You have an offseason coming up with flexibility in terms of cap. Roster spots. Like Rodney Hood is a non-guaranteed for next year. There's a lot of non-guaranteed money that I think they will just unload off the books. And they have all of their first rounders. This year's could be a very good pick. So take the talent, get your flexibility, and get to work in the offseason.
Exactly. So I think that's a good spot to end this off, guys. Like it's been far too long. To our viewers and listeners, we're going to try to make sure we're a little bit more regular with our content. But as always, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe, like, share everything. Like those likes on YouTube really help. So if like when you watch, if you enjoyed this, if you've made it this far, make sure you like our stuff. But any parting words, boys?
It's an exciting season for the Blue Jays. Please.
Baseball will be fun again. For the Jays. It's been a few years since we've had last year was a very short year, but I think it'll be an exciting team to watch. So jump on the bandwagon now.
And let's get on this tank bandwagon. Hopefully the Raptors get themselves a good pick and next year's a better year and we're watching them in Toronto.
Could even be this year. The players are starting to get vaccinated late April. Atkins announced that. Yeah, he announced that the vaccinations will begin. They can't do everybody at once because of side effects. So they're going to start to do dose 1 throughout, like while they are in Dunedin at the late April homestand. And then we'll see. So they could, I'm very optimistic, they could get back to Toronto maybe after the All-Star break.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of vaccinating players in major sports early. I think having professional sports on during this time keeps a lot of us sane. And there's not a whole lot to do. And
they travel. They're around a lot of. No matter what restrictions you put, you travel. You're around a lot of people. Exactly. They are at risk. So, and they're at risk of getting it, and they're at risk of spreading it.
Exactly, and regardless of how much the money they make, the human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And let's be real here. Without sports going on during the pandemic, this show wouldn't have happened. So thank you. So let's keep it going. Everybody, again, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.